And we're live. Welcome back to the LOOPcast. Warm welcome to all our live viewers today and those listening in podcast format. We have an excellent show prepared for you today. And Erica, what will we be discussing?
Well, we are going to hit on Kansas and what's going on there at the state capitol this morning as we speak. And then we're going to bring you an update on deportations. We've got the good, the bad, and the ugly with the Trump administration's efforts there. Then we get NPR gets its day on the Hill. And man, it was a wild testimony. It was popcorn all the way. I have some stuff to say about the anniversary of Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation and parents, kids, and cell phones. And then finally, we have a Pogo interview. Who doesn't love a good Pogo interview to end the week with? We've got Will Chamberlain from Article 3 talking about Trump's fights with activist judges. So it's going to be a great show.
It's going to be a great show for sure. Yeah, it was great talking to a lawyer. I was just like, why is everything Trump doing getting blocked? I need someone to explain this to me like I'm five, and they did. So that's great. Josh, how are you feeling today?
I mean, I feel like it's a good day, but I'm not a big fan of what's going on in Kansas.
Yeah. Oh, you even got the mug.
Yeah, let's drop a little color on that. So the black mass going on currently, supposedly.
I'm drinking coffee from my Hail Mary full of grace, punch the devil in the face mug.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, again, these Satanists, they're claiming it's a ritual, not a black mass. And they testified under oath in court that it was not a consecrated host. We can't know whether or not it is. Obviously, they could be lying. I mean, they're Satanists. They're not beyond that. But this is very similar, of a hate group to the KKK. It's not just another religion doing its thing. The whole purpose of their rituals is the inversion of the Catholic Mass. And, my friend, Tim Heelskamp, was talking with, he's a lawmaker, former lawmaker from Kansas, served in the legislature there. And he was talking with a lot of these evangelicals, and they're like, what is the Eucharist and what's going on there? So it is an evangelistic moment for Catholics, and we explain, actually, no, we believe the words are literal in John, the 6th chapter of John. We believe this is actually his body, and that's why they perform it in the ritual where they stab it, and they're like, oh. And it's just like this kind of interesting moment where, like, we know what it is. Our enemies know what it is.
Yeah. Whatever in between. Yeah.
I mean, so, but, again, in terms of a strategy, we don't think a hate group can claim that they're a religion and have the right to express their views completely. It's like, I could just invent a religion where I make fun of the Mormons and
or you burn the Quran, like that's my religion.
Yeah, I mean, like, no. First of all, I wouldn't do that because I'm not a nice person, but I wouldn't do it about the Quran because I'd like to continue breathing.
Yeah,
but there's that.
Good point.
So we, Catholic Vote, we organized a rally this morning, and then right about the time this episode gets done, there'll be adoration going on, I think, right about now, and then they're going to have a mass for reparations right across the street at a Catholic church, mass for reparations. And so, again, there's some people saying, well, just ignore them. Like, no, we're going out there and we're letting people know this is hateful speech and this is hateful stuff. And this is a mockery of God and of all Catholics. And so we're not going to let it stand. We're going to say something about it. And we need to drive public opinion. That's why we hate our own Logan Church has an op-ed in today's Topeka Capital Journal, letting people know, like, this is a hate group. This has no place in Kansas or any other place. So we got to push back at it. We can't just say, well, that's unfortunate that they're doing this. Like, no, stand up to this stuff.
Literally why Catholic Vote exists, right? It's one of the great joys of working here is we all have our individual roles to play. I do a ton of work on this podcast, obviously, but to know that the organization-wide conversation is, how do we get people to Kansas as soon as possible? How do we start working with lawmakers to make sure they understand how serious this is to Catholics? Exactly. It's like the perfect intersection of hopefully believers that want to have something get done and obviously be praying, and we can organize that prayer as well, but actually go be a public presence. Honestly, one of my favorite things about working at Catholic Vote.
I loved this campaign because to me, it was just a snapshot of how the Catholic Church can operate in the United States. So we've got the Archdiocese and the Kansas Catholic Conference working with the diocese there. They're doing like a mass, they're doing the prayers, they're all of that. We also have our rally with the prayers and the reparations, but we also have that element of, look, we have something to say in the public square. We had a petition go to the governor to forbid this ritual. And we got over 30,000 signatures from all over the country on this one. So this was a huge effort of both the genius of the laity, which is to act in the public square, and the power of prayer in the church with the hierarchy. So this was just Catholic writ large in Kansas, and ongoing prayers today for the safety of everyone there. We have a couple of reporters there. Over 150 Benedictine students are expected. So shout out
Benedictine College. Great institution.
Shout out to you guys. Way to make it happen.
My older brother's an alumni. Okay, so getting into the show here, we have our first one, deportations. And the way I'd like to treat this section is, Trump was given a broad mandate from the American people, go solve the immigration problem. I think everyone agreed it was a problem. He won the popular vote. He campaigned on it. I'm not envious of his task. I think it's got many challenges. Just to start with, we're going to end it with some of the conversations about lawfare going on, about executive authority, but it's a really challenging job, especially when the Biden administration allowed so many people into the country, basically unvetted. So we have a hard time actually cracking down on immigration. I think one thing really set off a couple of different issues here as a touch point for people to talk about it. There's an AI fad going around. This is where I'm like, okay, we got to make sure I explain this well. So there's an AI fad going around. ChatGPT has a new model, and it allows you to take animation styles and apply it to something. And from the official White House account, we get this meme here. It is a immigration officer, for the audio listeners, in like an anime style, and taking away this. I know who this is. This is a notorious fentanyl dealer that ICE got underneath. You have the article here. Virginia Becerra Gonzalez. She was previously deported and a felon convicted of fentanyl trafficking, and she was nabbed in Philadelphia. But I think the broader conversation around this basically is, should the White House be the account that's posting memes? Is this appropriate? So I'm trying to get my camera right here. There we go.
There we are.
And is this type of, many people are describing this as a type of casual cruelty coming from the White House account, not treating people with respect, or this is somehow disrespectful to the type of people we should be conducting ourselves differently when it comes to deportations. Before I get into the rest of it, Josh, do you have immediate thoughts on use of this trend and or cruelty?
Well, I mean, internet trends are a little peculiar to me sometimes. And, the Ghibli thing or whatever, and they made a cartoon out of it. Like, okay. So someone was like, oh, this is creating sympathy. Like, I don't see it. And I think, mocking, somebody who's like this, who's causing so much havoc, is a little different, but it doesn't strike me as particularly awful or egregious or bad, really, in any way. I'm like, this person is committing crimes left and right, and then all of a sudden they sob like a little baby. Like, making fun of them is fine by me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, like, from my point of view, that particular image was just in really poor taste. Like, it was just stupid. It's not egregious. The problem I have with it is just the optics, because the White House puts this out on the official White House page, and she's obviously a woman of color. She's overweight. She's sobbing, and then you have like this white ice guy. And for better or for worse, people just grab that image from the White House page and they throw it up with no context of like what this was making fun of. And I think the White House just needs to be a little more circumspect over how it's going to be used by political enemies. But like Josh said, if you actually did the work and researched, where did this meme come from and who is this woman? But nobody's going to do that. White House, like
8 steps too far.
90% of Americans are just going to see it and see like, this looks a lot like Nazi Germany, posters of people who look like Jews, quote unquote. And that's what it is being weaponized as. So I think it was dumb.
Most people look at this and say, they're being a little goofy and they busted someone who's a criminal. I mean,
hopefully.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can say as a digital,
pants, but who cares?
Right. I'm going to say as a digital native and someone that probably spends more time online than the average person, I got it immediately. And of course, the people in the comments were like, this is hilarious. But again, I think it's important for the White House to not misunderstand the mandate, what the American people want, and understand politically how noxious a lot of the kind of online ass posting is to the general public. I think this stuff is going to get really old really quick. And for people that don't understand what's going on, like the people that do understand and voted for it are like, this is hilarious, so good, they're in touch or whatever. But what kind of gains are you really making with people that already support you to begin with? I think taking an approach where you focus on people like Lake and Riley. You treat it kind of solemn, that you don't need to celebrate per se about getting people out. You just need to treat it as a duty. You're doing a moral duty to the people here. Focus on them. I'm saying for the general public.
I think we might be overreading into this.
I agree. So this is where I need to get to the part where I'm like, I think this reaction's overblown. Real cruelty is murdering Americans with fentanyl for years, disrespecting our laws, being a part of the systematic killing of American people. That's cruelty, right? I could go find real names of real Americans, of real kids, sons and daughters that have died from various different drugs being trafficked into the country, let alone all the murder that comes with that, let alone all the sex trafficking that comes with it. Like, that's real cruelty. So let's all take a chill pill for a second and understand what real cruelty is. Making an online AI fad, I think, is dumb, but it's not real cruelty. Okay. So let's just put that out of the way. I want to get into some real issues as it comes to immigration, because I think it is worth examining how the administration has been doing up to this point. So I'm going to call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. In my opinion, maybe you guys differ. But the first one, good, we get an arrest of an MS-13 street gang member, Pam Bondi, on the scene over on the East Coast, so specifically in Virginia. So, I mean, a notorious, I think they were saying like a top 3 leader in the United States, 24-year-old man from El Salvador. This is what I asked for when I said crackdown on criminals and deportation. I actually asked for more than this, but this, to me, the fact that we knew about this guy, he was in the country, and nothing was done by the previous administration to go after him in a serious manner, I think a total travesty and exactly what people want.
100%. Right. And so we've got these arrests of like the worst first, which is what Tom Homan promised. And like you said, it's what we voted for. It's what millions of Americans voted for across the political spectrum. It's that part of that big tent that Trump built. Not only that, but I mean, border crossings are down to like 0, right? We had 1 week where we had one border crossing reported, whereas the previous year we're talking about tens of thousands, over 12,000 in 1 month. So yeah, I mean, Trump is making a difference and closing down the border, shutting it down effectively, and getting it the worst first. I mean, could we pick up the pace a little bit? Sure. But like you said, this would be in the category of well done, more of this.
Yeah. And then I'm going to get into a little bit of the bad here, in my opinion, and maybe you guys disagree. So we have footage from a arrest of a Tufts University graduate student. And you can see it here. This Ramiza Ozturk, she was a graduate student at Tufts, gets taken by plainclothes officers, I assume ICE. It looks like at least 7 in the full video, but no identification, just picked right off the street. I assume this is in Philadelphia. And I believe she was then taken to Louisiana. So if you're asking, what did she do to get this kind of treatment? There actually there's an online website called Canary Mission, and it's a Israel-aligned organization that basically categorizes what people have done, specifically anti-Israel. All that I'm seeing on her is that she wrote an op-ed for the college against or in support of a boycott, divestment, and sanctions for the university, basically to divest from Israel-backed universities. I'm not seeing any incitement of violence. I'm not even seeing that she per se took part of a protest. Maybe she did. But that is all we know about her at this point, and that's all the administration has released to the public. Many people in uproar over this, and you get a response from Marco Rubio. I'll share that response now.
Mr. Secretary, a Turkish student in Boston was detained and handcuffed on the street by plainclothes agents. A year ago, she wrote an opinion piece about the Gaza war. Could you help us understand what the specific action she took led to her visa being revoked?
Yeah,
and what was your State Department's role in that process?
We revoked her visa. It's an F1 visa, I believe. We revoked it, and here's why. And I'll say it again. I said it everywhere. Let me be abundantly clear, okay? If you go apply for a visa right now, anywhere in the world, let me just send this message out. If you apply for a visa to enter the United States and be a student, and you tell us that the reason why you're coming to the United States is not just because you want to write op-eds, but because you want to participate in movements that are involved in doing things like vandalizing universities, harassing students, taking over buildings, creating a ruckus, we're not going to give you a visa. If you lie to us and get a visa and then enter the United States and with that visa participate in that sort of activity, we're going to take away your visa. And once you've lost your visa, you're no longer legally in the United States, and we have a right, like every country in the world has a right, to remove you from our country. So it's just that simple.
Thoughts?
Well, I don't know enough about her particular case to know if she participated in anything other than the op-ed. So if she did the op-ed, I'd have to read it to know whether or not it was sympathizing with a terrorist group like Hamas or not. I don't know enough about her particular case, but if presumably, I mean, like, what's the presumption here? I don't know. Has she only done the op-ed? That's what some people on the left say, or has she done other things?
Which seems to be what Rubio is saying here is like, look, it wasn't just an op-ed, but there was actual participation. I mean, Tufts University they were right up there with Columbia in terms of the seriousness of attacks on Jewish students, on university property. So if she was involved in that, then, it would put her in the same category like Mahmoud Khalil, right? I think the question here, I tried to do, when the story broke yesterday and then earlier this morning, trying to find some kind of social media footprint for this woman. There's really nothing. Like, there's multiple, groups where you can go and look at Fulbright students. Apparently she's a Fulbright scholar. She doesn't appear. She's not on LinkedIn. She's not. So, or it was all taken down before this went down. And I looked into revoking an F1 visa. It sounds to me from the reports, and again, there's nothing specific from the State Department on her case yet that's being reported. Once your visa is revoked, you have a grace period of usually 15 days, unless there's some kind of overarching reason that you need to leave the country immediately. And it looks like it's possible that her visa, if it was revoked more than 15 days ago, then she's going to be removed. A lot of hay's being made over the fact that she was sent to Louisiana to get her out of Massachusetts before she could appeal. And obviously the same thing happened with Mahmoud Khalil, the student from Columbia, who was sent to Louisiana to get him out of New York State. And people are like, oh, look, the administration's trying to like go under the justice system, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you're in a state like Massachusetts where they have sanctuary laws for Boston, they have, a very leftist judiciary system, and you have someone that you want to get out of the country because you've deemed them a threat to the United States, then yeah, you're going to get them to Louisiana. It's just, that's how the system works, but it's procedural. And people
presumably, if she was taken unjustly, she could still appeal in Louisiana, right? It's just the
Correct.
idea that you don't have communist judges who are just absolutely thwarting everything that Trump is doing because they don't like it. I mean, this is the thing that gets me. I think a lot of people up in arms. Like, Joe Biden just leaves the border open. 15 million people come to our country illegally. And then the next president comes in and says, let's reverse that and let's remove these 15 million people. And judges are like, no, I'm sorry, it's unconstitutional. Like, what? Just to undo the crap the last guy did is unconstitutional?
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Well, what Joe Biden did presumably is unconstitutional. Yes. Basically, I'm going to steel man the other side here because I actually find a lot of sympathy with it. I just feel like at minimum, this is misplaced priorities. By going after people that at most we know wrote an op-ed. Maybe she did more, but I feel like it should be on the current administration to make very public what she did at this point.
Go ahead, Josh.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I think this is bad optics.
Why would I presume that ICE authorities removed her only because of an op-ed? Like, I don't know that there's...
Why can't you make it public before you send 7 unmarked people to go take her to Louisiana?
No, because, like, if they have the evidence on her, additional evidence other than op-ed, then they're in their rights to just remove her and bring her to Louisiana and adjudicate there as they move on. I'm not presuming that these guys... I'm not making the presumption that the only thing against her is this op-ed.
Right.
I wouldn't either.
That's the only thing that the left has conceded.
Right.
I'm just saying that if that's all that they had on her was this op-ed, and they never saw her at any of these protests, never saw her screaming, death to Israel or something like that, and they didn't see anything else, then I'd be like, I'm surprised that they'd be like, let's take her out of the country. Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, can bureaucrats make a mistake? Can law enforcement make a mistake? Of course they can. But I mean, I'm not operating with knowledge that I don't know all the circumstances, but I'm assuming that there's probably more evidence that they have on her.
Yes. I just think in this case, especially with the video footage I just saw, more transparency rather than less would be good for the American people right now. Because I think it's just giving people ammo that they shouldn't have. You should not give this kind of ammo to liberals, especially like I'm thinking about where the majority of illegal immigration has come from. And you could pick your estimate. I think it's 20 to 30 million, probably generous estimate.
Okay.
I think the priority needs to be getting those people out of the country before we start going after student visas, specifically based on information presumably provided from, pro-Israel lobbies. And I'm not even a conspiracy theorist. I'm just saying that.
Okay. Well, the reason why they're going after student visas is, first of all, it's easier to adjudicate your visas.
It's low hanging fruit, right?
You don't have. There's less court procedures that have to go through. And the reason why they're going after it is precisely because Jewish students that are going to Columbia and also maybe Tufts, I didn't know about that, were feeling under physical threat and harm. And that's like, how is it that we have, these universities that are receiving, hundreds of millions of dollars in federal aid, indirect or direct, and they're allowing American citizens who are Jewish feeling completely threatened, like this, that is an absolute tragedy that we're allowing that to happen in the United States. And so, cramping down on the student visas of people who are associated with a group that's basically acting, like similar, not as egregious, of course, but it's similar to how KKK was acting with blacks. It's a whole lot of intimidation and people feeling completely afraid to even leave their dorm. So it's not, I'm not saying
I don't think I'd go that far. That's quite the
no, but the whole point
is,
analogies can help enlighten you. It's like, this is actually
I don't think it's a great analogy.
Yeah, thanks, bro. The point is that these students actually are in fear of leaving their dorm rooms at times, and they don't want to go to the cafeteria. And it's like, how is that happening in the United States of America?
Yes. Can I just put aside though, if you took part in the occupation of a building, I think just generally in principle, if you go to a different country and you want to study there, you should be on your P's and Q's. Like you should not be a part of any of this.
This is
you shouldn't occupy buildings.
This is the message it's sending.
100%. But no, I don't think, particularly with that video I just saw, if you want to engage in an educational debate on a different viewpoint, I think that there's very reasonable people that see what's going on in that region and have a different viewpoint. I think you could look at a lot of the civilian bombings. I think you could look at cutting off aid since March. I think there's a lot of very serious. I don't think it's a great situation either side, but you should have the freedom. What are we doing at universities here if you can't write an op-ed? And again, I'm just going to say that it's just an op-ed for now. It might be more, but why are you I don't think students were going to come here and be able to be intellectually honest with what they see going on around the world if they're so scared that they're going to get a goon squad pull up on them for, again, this is all assuming it's just this, and it might not be, but I don't think this is a great precedent to set for First Amendment freedoms that we champion here in America. And people do, under this student visa, have some First Amendment rights. There's a couple Supreme Court cases here. Like, what are we doing here? The whole point of a college is to have open, engaged debate and ideas. Again, I don't want to go as far to defend, and I would never defend occupation of buildings, kidnapping, threats of violence. Those all are grounds for deportation. They should happen.
Right.
But I think that happening at the same time.
Right. I know we're not arguing with that at all.
Okay.
We're just saying, I think, so would you be happy, Tom, if Rubio came out and was like, here's the footage of her at the Hamas thing burning an American flag?
Yes.
Yeah,
okay, but maybe they're going to wait till there's
Why do we have to wait?
Maybe because they want to hold, maybe they have a reason to hold their ammo until they get to the court in like New Orleans or something.
Because like you said, Pogo, she has some rights under the Constitution of habeas corpus and the suspension. So she can challenge this under Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2. Just had that written down. I did not know that in my head. Didn't want anyone to think.
Erica.
So she's if she is going to go through the process, then they're not going to put out all of their ammo for her lawyers to see ahead of that time. So that doesn't make sense either.
It's also the case that some of the evidence they have might implicate other people who are currently at Tufts and they haven't nabbed them yet. So I mean, there might be reasons why they're holding their ammo.
Possible reasons, right?
Yeah, I don't envy the job. Of the Trump administration. I don't think there's any good way or any acceptable way that, people are going to accept after being a part of these horrific, burnings, rallies, occupations where like a police officer comes in and takes them. Like there's no way that nothing is going to be acceptable there.
I will say this.
Yeah.
If it is a case that she just wrote an op-ed and the op-ed wasn't that bad and she really shouldn't have been removed her visa and it was, a mistake and a pretty gross mistake, and having to send her to New Orleans or whatever, and she didn't deserve it. Like, oh, okay, my bad. Shouldn't have done that. Whoops, we screwed up. Like if that's the case. But like the left will never admit to any problems that they have. Like you let Columbia become a complete crazy zone where people were occupying buildings, people were screaming threats. Jewish students felt like they couldn't, none of that. Like Oh, what? Like, is that bad at all? Like,
Yeah, that
but
was
this
horrific.
is like the cardinal sin of all time. Like give me like a lack of proportion, and
Yeah.
that's again why we have such a problem in our culture today, in our country today, in our politics, when one side is absolutely completely communist psycho, and
Right.
it's like so there's if they act like that, and there's never any self reflection, and they never admit when they make any mistakes, then there's absolutely no incentive for us to be like, yeah, I guess we kind of screwed that one up. So
Yeah, I get the incentive thing, but isn't that kind of projection in a way? I understand, like, don't we need to acknowledge when we're wrong, when we went too far, if we ever hope for them to get back to? Because there are goodwill people on the other
hey,
side.
we do at the LOOPcast. I'm just saying,
For
like,
sure. I just want to make that clear. Like, I'm happy to apologize. We talked about the signal thing on Monday. Like, I definitely differed with the administration on this. I think that they should have handled it much differently. I'm not the administration. And
what
I'm a
story
guy
was
who
that?
hates
I forgot
people
about that
that
one.
try to be like, oh, I'm independent. I'm not partisan, I'm not whatever. Because those people are the worst. Like,
Oh, they
I'm just
know
calling
it
it balls
all.
and strikes. I
Yeah.
hate those people.
Well, and I think
But-
when it comes down, sorry, go ahead, finish.
I think that a degree of humility and reasonable questioning, implying good faith on a percentage of the other side in this issue is necessary for progress for the country. If we were to just treat everyone like a communist and they were to treat us all like, authoritarian whatevers, we're going to be in this forever. And maybe that's just the way politics works. I don't want it to be that way personally. I don't think that that's going to be very good for the healing of the country. And I think Trump's done a pretty good job actually as a whole of working with people. And I've not seen that from the other side, but I would hope to aspire people from the other side to start working together.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be
For
idealistic, but
hey, Ezra Klein and Jon Stewart seem to be ready to
I saw
shake
that.
hands across the aisle. Did you see that interview? Can I just
Yeah.
interrupt for a second?
Yeah,
So
go
Jon
for it.
Stewart, everyone knows Jon Stewart, Daily Show,
Comedian.
the left's comedian, quote unquote. So Ezra Klein of Abundance of the New York Times, he goes on and he's explaining to Jon Stewart about the $42 billion that was devoted to getting broadband across rural America at the beginning of the Biden administration, and how like nothing happened. There were no connections made. And Jon Stewart's sitting there like, oh my gosh, are you serious? And Ezra's like, yeah, I just discovered this when I was fact checking for my book. And I'm sitting there listening to this interview as these like people who created the problem with their monopoly over mainstream media being like, oh my gosh, did you know about the broadband? I'm like, yes, I knew about the broadband. For 4 years, I've known about the broadband. It was just like watching this revelation. Anyway, I just had to get that off my chest.
Just to put a little color on what Eric is saying, it was, the states and local governments that wanted to apply for this, and there were 56 of them that did, because I think it might have included not just states, but maybe territories. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea behind it is that they would have to go through this process, and there's all these steps.
14
and it ended up being like
steps.
Yeah, and honestly, by the time you got to election day, right at the end of the fourth year, only like 4 or something like that of the 56 had been gotten through all the way to the end. And he's like, "Oh, you mean they got the money?" Like, no, they just finished the process. They didn't actually even get the money
To apply, right?
Yeah, just to apply.
And Jon Stewart's like, "What?
He just about loses
In America?"
it. And it's like, yeah, maybe we do need Doge people because this is a crazy problem. And again, I like to remind everyone that's an example. This is our government. We can change this. Like,
Yeah.
Congress could just say, okay, you know what? The broadband stuff, we wanted to get that done. Let's streamline the process, 120 days and done,
Right.
and not have all these, challenges and all this, boom, 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 and just move forward. It would be welcome.
I think what I do appreciate about the Trump administration, I think JD Vance specifically said this, is that we should expect more from our government. And I completely agree.
I
We
always say
don't
this, yes.
we don't have to have the soft bigotry of low expectations forever. And like
Right.
Trump Vance, for the first time in a long time, because of all the shakeup, I actually do expect a lot of my government. And maybe I want to end deportations on this point. I very supportive of deportation. I think that repatriation is necessary for the continued flourishing of this country. What
Yes.
happened over the last 4 years is insane. I'm seeing, so a couple things I'm concerned about at this point is that ICE has stopped reporting publicly numbers of their deportations. And based on what they have deported so far, if we assume that annually we're going to see 451,920 deportations per year, that is less than Biden's last year in office, 684,000 deportations this year. I'm going to caveat all that with, we're going to talk to the lawyer at the end of the day. that what the judges are doing right now are for sure hindering the success of this program.
No question.
No question doubt that. And I think Trump has a ton of obstacles to do this. But I would like to see more deportation numbers from what was promised from Trump. And I think he's working towards that. But I'm getting concerned. And of course, Biden did it in the last year to try to appease voters to think he was going to crack down, which is ridiculous.
Well, and you have to subtract from Biden's number all the people he was letting in over the border illegally.
Totally.
So
But I do not want the Trump administration to lose the plot here and just go into the memeing and going to let's go after all the students on flimsy stuff. Like, get back to the plot here. Let's keep returning people to their home countries, especially the most dangerous. I can
assure you they have not forgotten.
Yes. And Tom Homan, 100%, I think he's doing a great job. The other cringe thing I saw was Kristi Noem did a video in front of and of course, this just allows people to get in digs on him because I think
and again, she's wearing like this tight shirt, like every shirt. It's just like, is she an Instagram model or is she a cabinet member? And she's got a $60,000 Rolex watch. I mean, like, really?
This is what I'm saying. Like, this is a part of losing the plot. Like, of course, you get Father James Martin hits this with, these people aren't props. And I saw a loop in the background, so I'm not even sure she's there personally. Of course, you get the extensions and the Rolex. Like, this looks terrible. Stop cosplaying something that you are not. And I would love to see Tom Homan back in Chicago doing raids again, because that's what he was born to do. But like, using these people as a prop, and I think it's just a bad representation of what's going on in El Salvador to begin with. They have a huge program. Someone actually, I watched an interesting video profiling it. They allow people in there. I don't think like the worst of the worst gang members, but people in prison to work, to take time off their sentences. And what they're working on is uniforms, hospital stuff, basically stuff to benefit the public. And it can take a day off their sentence for every day they work. So if you had a 4-year sentence, you get a 2-year sentence. I'm like, that seems like a great program. That seems like something we should be highlighting. And maybe implementing in the United States as well in terms of actually benefiting the public and rehabilitation and everything.
I'm sure the ACLU will be all over that.
Exactly. We have our obstacles to that. But yeah, don't lose the plot. But I will say the next section is going to be very fun. We get into NPR, which was hysterical. But before we get into that, I want to talk about home title lock. Did you know that American homeowners have over $32 trillion in equity? And criminals are targeting it with growing scam after the FBI, they call it house stealing. Scammers can transfer your title out of your name using a one-page document they file at the county. Then they can take out loans against it or even sell it behind your back. And the scariest part, you won't find out until collection or foreclosure notices start arriving in your mailbox, leaving you with a financial and legal nightmare. The best way to protect your equity is with Home Title Lock's exclusive $1 million triple lock protection. This service allows 24/7 monitoring, urgent alerts, and if fraud should occur, their U.S.-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix the fraud and restore your title. So when's the last time you've checked your title? If you're like me, the answer is never, and that's exactly what scammers are counting on. The good news is we partnered with Home Title Lock to offer you 30% off their services. Go to HometitleLock.com/LOOPcast to save 30%, and you'll also get a free title history report to ensure you're not already a victim. And make sure you check out the $1 million triple lock protection details when you get there. Click on the link in the description below. That's HometitleLock.com/LOOPcast. Thank you to Home Title Lock for sponsoring the episode.
Thanks, guys.
So, man, what a committee hearing this was. The House had a committee hearing specifically on DOGE. The subcommittee, it was titled Anti-American Airwaves, Holding the Heads of NPR and PBS Accountable.
Love that title.
I don't even need to really explain
Christy off the screen yet or what?
Yeah, get Christy out of here.
Christy off the screen.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Come on, Christy.
Yeah.
There was one clip that came out that was very edifying, I think. And then there's a couple that were not so edifying. I'm going to start with the edifying one first. Probably is a good example to conduct hearings going forward. And yes, the CEO, Catherine Maurer, made this pretty easily, done with her tweet history. I will go into that now.
Existing society is the Miss Maurer. I want to start with you. Just generally, would you say you generally agree or disagree with the following statement? The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles.
I would not say I agree with that.
You're not. That's good to hear. It's interesting because a lot of your thinking, as expressed by your public statements, is deeply infused with economic and cultural Marxism. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that America is addicted to white supremacy?
I believe that I tweeted that, and as I've said earlier, I believe much of my thinking has evolved over the last half decade.
It has evolved. Why did you tweet that?
I don't recall the exact context, sir, so I wouldn't be able to say.
Okay.
What
Do you believe that
context?
America believes in black plunder and white democracy?
I don't believe that, sir.
You tweeted that in
sir.
reference to a book you were reading at the time, apparently, The Case for Reparations.
I don't think I've ever read that book, sir.
You tweeted about it. You said you took a day off to fully read the case for reparations. You put that on Twitter in January of 2020.
Apologies, I don't recall that I did.
Okay.
I no doubt that your tweet there is correct, but I don't recall that.
Okay. Do you believe that white people inherently feel superior to other races?
I do not.
You don't. You tweeted something to that effect. You said, I grew up feeling superior. Ha, how white of me. Why did you tweet that?
I think I was probably reflecting on what it was to grow up in an environment where I had lots of advantages.
It sounds like you're saying that white people feel superior.
I don't believe that anybody feels that way, sir. I was just reflecting on my own experiences.
Do you think that white people should pay reparations?
I've never said that, sir.
Yes, you did. You said it in January of 2020. You tweeted, yes, the North, yes, all of us, yes, America, yes, our original collective sin and unpaid debt, yes, reparations, yes, on this day.
Unpaid.
I don't believe that was a reference to fiscal reparations, sir.
What kind of reparations was it a reference to?
I think it was just a reference to the idea that we all owe much to the people who came before us.
That's a bizarre way to frame what you tweeted. Okay, how much reparations have you personally paid?
Sir, I don't believe that I've ever paid reparations.
Okay, it's just for everybody else.
I'm not asking anyone
Seems
to
to
pay
be what
reparations,
you're
sir.
suggesting.
I mean, this is only halfway through.
This was
There's
it
two
was
and a half more
satisfying.
minutes. This is the CEO
You
of
know, I gotta
National
say,
Public Radio.
I wasn't too familiar with Representative, what's his name from Florida?
Brandon Gill.
Brandon Gill. He almost has like a, who's the guy, like Columbo, like
Yeah. Little
playing
bit.
dumb, and it's just like you're
Like
opening
You tweeted about it.
Yeah.
It was
It
great.
says right here.
Said, sir, I was unfamiliar with your game.
I'm very impressed with how he handled that. Just very low key.
Okay, so you were impressed, and that was low key. Would you like to hear the complete opposite of that?
Sure.
I mean, this lady, Catherine Maher, has that kind of like 80s, blonde villain look to her.
Yeah.
Well, she's CIA, so it should surprise you.
Yeah,
Zero.
of course she's a spook, right?
Okay, so this is our favorite Jasmine Crockett, and I can't believe
I
I have to
didn't see this
apologize for
one.
this.
Mm.
It's graphic. There's language. So
Whatever it is that y'all want somebody to say. And the idea that you want to shut down everybody that is not Fox News is bullshit. We need to stop playing because that's what y'all are doing in here. You don't want to hear the opinions of anybody else. And the Constitution says Congress shall make no law respecting or establishing of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the
gentlewoman's
What?
time has expired.
press.
The gentlewoman's
What
I don't
is she?
even.
What is she talking about?
Therefore,
Free
the
exercise of
government needs to
religion?
establish a media company.
A propaganda machine for cultural Marxism. That's what we
It's
need.
a violation of the Constitution for you to shut down a government media operation.
That's right. Oh my gosh.
Okay, and then my personal favorite, Bert and Ernie, get brought into the discussion.
Maybe we want separation of media and state.
That
Separation
you're all
of Bert with
pushing, I
Ernie.
think, doesn't stop there. This, of course, is Bert and Ernie. Now, these two guys actually live together. They're friends.
no.
They're supportive of each other. Now, that might be triggering to our chairwoman and some on this committee, and perhaps that's also why we're here today. Ms. Kerger, an important question. Are Bert and Ernie part of an extreme homosexual agenda?
No.
Thank you, Ms. Kerger, and thank you for being a good sport. Now, I'm obviously using some humor here, but the fact that we're sitting here today
wasn't
talking
funny.
about defunding public television is actually not funny.
Oh,
At a
I
time
was
where we
wrong.
can't agree on basic facts, and while the free press is under
not
attack,
funny.
we need public media like
problem is
PBS and
too many
NPR
women did
more than
tickle
ever.
me.
A
Elon.
large majority of Americans say they
Okay, Josh, who is in charge of making these?
Oh, that's the staffers.
Like the staffers
Yeah.
have to go to like Kinko's or whatever, and I got to print out fire Elon and
Are
save
you kidding
Elmo.
me?
Yeah.
At this point, they have their own printing press. Come on, there's no way they're having to run down the street to the FedEx store.
The FedEx store on the hill.
So
Why?
go ahead, Erica.
Anyway, I could go on and on.
Yeah, they did make Bert and Ernie gay, by the way.
Mhm.
That's why it came up. And
That was
NPR
like in
Now-
in 2015. They made them gay.
yeah, late revision.
They were always the little suspects.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So this whole thing is basically like, and they didn't say exactly what it was about. It was just anti-American airwaves or whatever. But NPR actually only gets federal funding for under 1% of its budget. Now I will say that's for like the DC stations. They are like a network of stations. And so if you really spread it out, it's actually 10 to 15% of the network's operational funding. So at this
I
point,
want to make sure I understand what you said correctly.
Yeah.
You're saying that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting gets approximately 10 to 15% of their funding from the federal government.
So is
that what you're saying?
Basically the way that it works is there's national NPR, and then there's all these local
affiliates.
NPR stations all over the world. And the affiliates, their funding is like 10 to 15% of their funding. But the national NPR, it's only 1% of their funding.
Seems like with a little merchandising, they wouldn't need any federal government money at all, and they could be independent. And they wouldn't have to worry about who's president.
Exactly. So Yuri Berliner, the former employee of NPR who blew this whole thing up. This hearing really happened because he's a former senior editor at NPR. He wrote a story in the Free Press last year about how NPR lost its way and became a leftist propaganda cultural Marxism machine that reaches 12 to 14 million Americans every week through its news show, morning, what is that called? Morning something. But anyway, he wrote last week ahead of this, he's like, guys, just divest yourself of federal funding and then you can do whatever you want. You can become who you want to be. Just like Columbia could divest itself of federal funding and be perfectly fine and become who they want to be. But they can't let it go. They have to have this veneer of we're a federal agency, or we're funded by the American people, so we're for the American people. It's part of their like mole tactic, and it's ridiculous. I was doing
They want the federal imprimatur.
Yes, they want that imprimatur of like, oh, we must be objective because the federal government funds us.
So I mean, I'm on this same page with all of this. I think the moment it was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe how crazy this is, when they wrote something saying, hey, you might have seen we're not saying anything about the Hunter Biden laptop story, and here's why. And instead of just reporting on it, they reported on why they chose not to.
They won't report on it.
Crazy, right? Crazy. Like it was, and I actually never really grew up with NPR, any of their shows ever really being relevant to me. I know that some people kind of have a nostalgia for, was it Car Talk or something like that? Like they had a couple
I love
shows
Car Talk. I love
it.
it.
So, but my question is,
opinion.
obviously it's crazy. 87 Democrats to 0 Republicans on their board right now. Is there a place for any public programming right now at this point, or should it just all basically go to the free market? Do we feel like we're losing anything
if you really want a bipartisan consensus here, Donald Trump should fire everyone in NPR and replace it with super crazy MAGA heads that you find not just on like the Fox, but like OAN, and just make it so right wing, and then the Democrats will freak out and they'll call for it to be shut down. Like,
sounds good.
Solved.
It's a good strategy.
So your answer is no. There's no place for public funding.
I don't see could there possibly be a reason? Maybe, but in general, we're talking about a federal government giving money to a media organization. I want a true free speech. So no, I don't want that. Again, is it worth borrowing money from China to do? Like, no. Like it's one thing to say, well, we really need an interstate between Phoenix and Las Vegas because we don't have one. Like that's okay. That's important. But like NPR, like really? It doesn't seem to me that important.
100%.
I think the freedom of information now too, like the lowest cost ever of barrier to get into the media game now, probably just makes it obsolete in a way. Like there will always be someone now with the desire and ability to cover any story they want.
Yeah.
Anytime.
We hear about people giving out communist ideas for free. Why should we have to pay for it?
Yeah, but basically like you could get an iPhone and make a documentary. Like that was not possible in the 60s. So and maybe there was a time where it would have been necessary, but I feel like it's just not anymore. It's kind of served its purpose. Not in a good way either.
And I think that look, people always point to, Ken Burns in the Civil War, and Ken Burns, America's storyteller. Where would we be without him? And he never would have gotten going if it wasn't for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. You're like, no, if he created a product that was really good and really popular, then he could have found funding. That's how the free market of ideas works. And I think the Civil War, which was sort of his like first big breakthrough piece, that could have stood on its own. We didn't need all of our funding the whole way. So yeah, did we get Ken Burns out of public funding? We did historically, but could we have gotten Ken Burns any other way? Yeah. And
Well,
did we really need Ken Burns to do anything other than the Civil War?
that would fall much more under the model, the previous historical model of how anything got funded. Like
Yeah.
you get funded by patrons, even
Yeah.
artists back in the
By
day.
creating
like
a good
Yes.
product.
right.
Yes.
A rich person would fund a talented artist and they would make something. That's actually closer to how historically it's been. I feel like the recent trend in terms of state funded media as a quote neutral source is actually quite the diversion. Even from news media, if you think back to the beginning of the country, how proudly different parties had different media outlets and they would ruthlessly attack each other. But at least they were honest. Said, hey, we're
I love
Republicans. Hey, we're on the right. Hey, we're on the left. Doesn't matter. So
That's
the
been my
veneer
life
of neutrality is
mission.
ridiculous.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. To get rid of that.
To get rid of this 20th century nonsense of neutrality in media. Like,
Yeah.
hey, lay your cards on the table and then let's talk, let's
Mhm.
fight and let's really talk about what's going on. But again, I would say, if you want Democrats to get rid of NPR, just take someone like Jack Pozo, put him in charge of
Well, didn't Trump put Carrie Lake in charge of something media related?
Voice of America.
Oh,
Yeah, that's the overseas
right.
stuff.
Oh, okay.
She actually has, I think she had such promise, and then she became a total train wreck when she ran for governor.
Yeah.
But before that, she spent 20 years in the news media. So she actually has qualifications for Voice of America. So
Yeah.
makes sense.
Okay. Now we're going to skip the pride stuff today. We're going to get right into the anxious generation.
Ooh.
Erica?
Yeah,
Tell me
so
about it.
this week was the 1-year anniversary of a book by a man named Jonathan Haidt, sociologist, called The Anxious Generation. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because this is an example of a book, a piece of academic work that is actually making concrete changes in the world. And the book centered around why is it that the youngest generation of Americans, Gen Z, why are they more anxious, more depressed, more unable to read a book than anyone has ever been before? And he maps it onto the rise of the smartphone and what he calls the great rewiring theory. The reason this book is so interesting is because he had planned to just drop the book, do a quick tour, and then go on to writing his next book because he didn't think it would make a splash. But instead, this book has catalyzed a movement around the world. So schools, states, and entire countries are now implementing phone-free school policies, raising the minimum age for social media accounts, places like Australia. States as wide-ranging in America as Virginia, Alabama, and even California urging statewide bans in schools as a result of the research that he did in this book. So really interesting. A year after the book's publication, we have about 76% of public schools are prohibiting non-academic use of cell phones or smartphones during school hours, according to National Center for Educational Statistics. So what happened? So I would say that Haidt's research in the book, and it's really disturbing exactly what this is doing to our kids' brains, but it gave parents the numbers and the vocabulary to articulate what they'd been observing since about 2010 in their children and in groups of children in schools, and what teachers have been talking about in terms of their frustrations in the classroom with the rise of cell phones. He points to the Great Rewiring Theory as a 2-phase movement that has changed our kids' brains. So phase 1 actually started in 1990. So this is like when I'm 9 years old, but it's with the loss of play in childhood, right? So we stopped having children who had regular long periods of boredom or amuse yourself, and they're all scheduled to death. And then of course, 2010 to 2015 is phase 2 with the smartphone. And he was saying like 40% of 2-year-olds now have access to an iPad for their majority of their entertainment. It's just crazy. The thing I wanted to talk about with you all is that the book frames the escape route out of this madness in terms of 4 norms that he's saying they will only work if they're happening collectively. So this has to be a societal-wide effort. And here's the 4 norms. I can't talk norms. So no phones, no smartphones before the age of 14 years old, coupled with no social media before the age of 16. Phone-free schools has to be blanket across the culture. And then number 4, more time outdoors and independent activity where you let kids go do things and make mistakes on their own. So, Josh, I want to kick it over to you as father of 6. Do you have a phone policy at your house with your kids? Do you have like social media policies? I know your kids go to Chesterton, so it's a phone-free school for high
Yeah,
school.
that's right. And the governor, Brian Kemp of Georgia, just signed that bill making it schools phone free, which I think is a wonderful idea.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, what we try to do at our own house, like, first of all, kids don't get phones until they're old enough to drive, or basically in high school, because like there might be activities and we're trying to, but before that, no. I mean, my kids do have laptops. We have computers at home, and there are tablets or whatever, but there's, we monitor the time consumption. No social media before 16, absolutely. And in fact,
Yeah.
I outright discourage it even until they're 18, really. I just think it's mostly obnoxious. And again, different things for different reasons. Like, for women, it's for young girls, it's just you see the reality, the unreality of Instagram, and you feel like you have to compete against that. And then it's also the unreality for boys. Like, that person, that is the image you're looking at, doesn't even exist. It's not even real. Like, so I as much as we can do to monitor that and cut it down. And then also, go outside to kick them outside.
Yeah.
We have 38 acres here. Find something. Get imaginative. Here's some power tools. Go hurt yourself.
Here's some great power tools. What about you, Pogo? You're a digital native.
Yeah, I have an interesting perspective on this, probably because I have kids now. Obviously, they're pretty young, but by the time they get old enough for this conversation, I'm having a hard time even thinking like, what's
it going to look
with
like?
AI? Like, what the heck is all the digital space going to look like? Because in some ways, I'm a bit torn because my wife and I are photographers, video editor. Like, I'm a video editor. I have a podcast online. Like, I have a hard time. Like, my entire job right now is basically thanks to the internet. And I think that it is a tremendous tool if used correctly. I also personally was a test dummy for all of the worst things of social media. Exposure to porn is basically a daily occurrence if you're on the internet, which is crazy. That was thrown at me. Social media was basically the dawn of Instagram becoming really popular, was my childhood. So at least for me, I had a phone for communication similar to Josh. It was actually like a track phone. Does anyone know what a track phone is? The throwback.
Yeah.
You had preloaded minutes, and I had to hit a button 3 times to get a letter. I think I eventually upgraded to a sliding phone, which was very exciting.
Ooh.
I think when I was like jitterbug.
No. Yeah, at 16, and then when I was 18, I went away to college. I got a smartphone, and it actually is hard too and I actually like some of the initiatives where colleges are saying no smartphones. I think because when I want an organic or authentic, like college intellectual atmosphere, I think that it's a ginormous, basically almost making it impossible to be able to partake in the intellectual culture that you want from a college. I'm a little bit biased. I went to a liberal arts university, but I even think the dawn of online university is horrific for the actual mission of what a college should be. And I look back now and I almost missed that period of time where my only job was basically to dive into ideas as deep as I possibly could. Obviously enjoy some of the fruits, make friendships, enjoy leisure, things like that. But on an intellectual level, I don't think I appreciated it enough at the time. Like, I could spend a day, because I didn't have kids and other responsibilities, to read a book. I could read an entire book, start to finish, or really dive into ideas or debate or
What
things
is that like?
I know.
Exactly. I'm
It's
like,
so
it's
long
gone
ago.
now I'm watching art debates on YouTube. I was in debate in high school. Like, so I actually think on a high school level now for children, I think it's actually going to be more important than ever because of the dawn of AI to go back to actually writing in blue books.
Absolutely.
All of my
100%.
tests were in blue books. I had to write physically, and then they were read by the professor. Yes, it's going to be a little bit more inconvenient to grade, but I think if we move to AI, people are going to genuinely lose the art of being able to form a sentence by yourself,
Yep.
write ideas,
Mhm.
write things out. And I think it'd be a travesty to lose, regardless of you want to talk about the utilitarian nature of what you can do with AI. Losing that, I think, would be insurmountable, basically, for many of the benefits you get from that. So I think in general, I'm away from personal screens from children big time. That won't be happening in my house. I think there's a utility for communication, but in a way, I'm very anti screens too young, big time.
Yeah, I mean, 95% of what you said, I agree with. The only thing I'd push back at, like, I'm not against online college or whatever. I think it really is helpful for many people. So
I think if
that's a
you're
small thing, and I don't want to kick up a bunch of dust right now.
Yeah. I know we got to keep going, but if your definition of college is an accreditation system, in which, to be fair, most are, then yes. But I actually think that in the liberal arts tradition, college or university, you need to be in person, because it's not really about getting accredited. It's not being able to go and get a job after. I think those have their place, but it's about the formation of the intellect and continual curiosity, creating that disposition in someone so that they can go forward into whatever they do next. And then you can go get accredited and whatever. But if there's not that formational period, you're missing something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my daughter's visiting Steubenville today, actually.
Oh, nice.
It's really great. And they have that program where there's actually a scholarship attached to, if you give up your cell phone, if you're accepted into the program, you say, I'm going to go smartphone free.
Love that.
For my time here at Franciscan. They have more kids apply to that than they can supply the scholarships for, because, and then they have kids who aren't even on the scholarship who are like, this is great. I am giving up my smartphone. And I'm all for that. Because like people are like, well, how are they going to know how to function in society if they don't practice using a cell phone? You're like, no, that is a skill that I picked up as an adult later in life. Like I had been a parent for 8 years before I got a smartphone, and I learned how to use it. Like I'm pretty good at it now. So you don't need to be using it like from the time you're 18 to 22 to then be able to use it later in life. So those years are really, really precious, and don't waste them on your screen for sure.
I think most people just need the push or opportunity. And I actually think more people than you would think would trade it in.
Yeah.
But people feel attached, or they need to for their job or whatever. And I think those are reasonable concerns. But if I was in like a college situation like that and I had the choice, looking back, I would have done it.
Yeah. And I would say, I know we have to move on, but just like one more point here as a parent, because Jonathan hates pointing to, we need as a society to have a critical mass of parents making similar decisions for their kids when it comes to smartphones. And I would say that a lot of parents feel the pressure of, okay, they're in school. 90% of the kids in the high school here have some kind of smartphone that they're on during the day, or they pick it up as soon as the classes are over and check it. But I think the more parents who are convicted of this can talk to each other and say, okay, we're agreeing as a group of parents, we're going to hold off on the smartphones, we're holding off on social media. There is strength in numbers there. And so I would just encourage anyone who's thinking about walking it back, or maybe you gave your kid a smartphone at 14 and you're like, this was a bad idea. Okay, then turn around and say, I'm taking it away. Yeah, they're going to squawk at you, but they're going to thank you in like 5 years. So we have to talk about it as parents more and act with more like courage of our convictions when it comes
overall, just the biggest problem I have with parenthood at this time of age is that the children are the deciders on not just the phones, but like,
for example, culturally,
we talk to, I talk to a lot of parents about, like, hey, we have a Chesterton school in our town. You should come to St. Michael. And the parents like, yeah, but my kid doesn't want to. It's like,
wait, who's the parent? Who's paying tuition?
Yeah.
You are the parent.
Like, are you just lying to me and you don't want to send the kid there? Or is it that you really do want the kid to go to that school and you're not going to send them to it? You're not going to send your kid to where you think is the best place to get an education because the kid
doesn't want to?
Unacceptable. I just think that's so lowly.
Come on, Mom.
That's certainly a concern, but I'll say in my unique personal experience, and I think I'll actually be sharing this at the Courage Under Fire conference, which is cool. But I left public school so in between my sophomore and junior year of high school. And basically my mom came to me and was like, hey, we're going to do this thing, Regina Chaley. It's a hybrid Catholic homeschool model, classical, whatever. And it's up to you. Like, I see that you're doing well. I was doing well grades wise. I was a part of everything. And it was kind of like what I'm saying about the push. Like, I didn't even know it was a possibility, but when I did and I heard about it, and of course we had a really strong homeschooling community, so I would be able to be a part of that more, which was definitely enticing. But I just kind of had like the base instinct, and maybe young kids wouldn't be able to have this, but I was like, I feel like it doesn't need to be this way. I don't need to be in this pressure cooker. It's not that this is bad per se, but it just doesn't feel like, why am I putting myself through this? I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I was like, whatever, like, what's the worst that can happen? I go over for a year, don't like it, and transfer back. Like, it's not going to be the end of the world. And just to go see the complete shift in cell phone policy was a huge part of that. Mm-hmm. But then the education itself, like, oh my gosh, why have I never read Plato? I'm in high school. I'm like a junior. Like, these ideas had never even been broached. Like, the stuff that I was reading in my lit classes in public high school was like,
I thought Plato was
crazy.
Sold in a jar for kids.
Exactly. So, I mean, I was reading full books. I was like, this is crazy. Why have I never read a full book
reading full books
up until this point? So it completely changed my life and set me on a different trajectory. And I'm really grateful for it. So I think that it was a big part of that. All right. We went way over. Twilight Zone. Josh, we can go quick. What you got?
Well, I mean, we've all heard all these different companies, from Victoria's Secret to Pepsi. Now, Major League Baseball has said to DEI, "You're out."
That was
you just wanted to say you're out.
That was adorable.
You really wanted to say that.
You're out.
Josh, did you ever? I actually umpired for 2 seconds.
I did one time. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. How'd you do?
Of course. I was a match. I'm not saying I was as extravagant as Leslie Nielsen and Naked Gun 2, but I had a lot of fun.
Yeah. I could see you really enjoying like tossing out an unruly parent.
But I mean, just think about like, Trump has been president for not even 2 months or whatever, 2 months now. And all these major corporations are jettisoning this absolutely toxic DEI stuff. That's the kind of stuff it really is causing harm, and these corporations are finally getting rid of it. And so we'll see if in June, if some of these companies won't go crazy rainbow for the quote pride stuff. We'll see, but at least
I think that's an interesting question.
Interesting, yeah. June could look very different this year.
I will say,
already on the way out. But
I was going to do a full segment on this. I won't take forever, I promise. But there's a couple examples of this. University of Michigan dropped its DEI department.
Yes, blue, baby.
The university. Right. However, I will say, and I think this is the same with the MLB because they just removed it on their website. But if you ask a spokesperson, they're still committed to their diversity efforts or whatever. They're still kind of using.
Is it University of Michigan, or are they serious?
Exactly.
It's hard to say.
So University of Michigan said they're evolving to a HOPE program. They're not firing anyone from these positions. They're just shuttering the offices and they're moving them now. So I think that there's a decent amount of maneuvering gamesmanship. And I think it's really important to keep the foot on the gas and to keep the pressure on, because I don't think the people are dropping this out of the goodness of their heart. I think President Trump from the top is doing a great job of putting the pressure on, but I think the job needs to be finished because they're just shifting around discrimination to different words to get around legal stuff. And so I'm curious to see the long-term commitment to this. It's kind of like, it's a fad right now, basically, to drop all this to get in the good graces of Trump and grants and things like that. It needs to become a permanent fixture. No question.
100%. Let's do it.
So, Erica.
Well, we were criticizing, some of the Trump stuff this week, so I just wanted to bring up another win. This is a massive one. I love this. We have a new head of the FDA. This week he was confirmed, Dr. Marty Makary, who's not Catholic, but he is Egyptian Orthodox, so, pretty close. We're going to take it. Yeah, we'll take it. But he's a very pro-life physician, very well positioned to actually make some good changes at the FDA, particularly in the area of chemical abortions. And this was something that the New York Times, everyone, the Democrats, flipped out during his confirmation hearing. And the way the New York Times put it was, Dr. Makary signaled that he shared Republicans' concerns about the current policy when it comes to chemical abortion issued during the Biden administration, which expanded access by allowing women, to obtain the pills without an in-person medical appointment, which has resulted in the deaths of multiple women, including one who was propped up by the Kamala Harris campaign as, oh my gosh, she died because of abortion law restrictions. No, She died because she was given an abortion drug and then sent back to Georgia to take it alone without any kind of oversight. So he vowed that he was going to take a good, solid, hard look at the data, meet with scientists who viewed the data on the abortion pill, and to go over the whole ridiculous way that it was approved in the early 2000s under pressure from the Clintons. So,
with Marty, I
yep.
mean, the guy is absolutely whip smart. He was one of my friends when I lived in DC 25 years ago.
Oh, no way.
I didn't know that.
No, no
I did
way.
not know that. That is so cool.
Well
yeah,
connected.
I mean, like you sit and talk with this guy, and you're just like, this guy is a bloody genius, like, whoa, like so he is.
That's great.
How'd you know this guy?
All my friends in the conservative, circles in DC. He was
That's
a good
amazing.
guy.
Well, I'm glad he is in the driver's seat of the FDA, and hopefully he can start to walk back these crazy directives from the Biden administration, including things like doctors should not report adverse effects of mifepristone. What? What drug do we not report when it goes wrong?
Like, it's just like what Scalia said about the law. It's an abortion carve-out. We can do whatever we want so long as it's in support of abortion. They're doing the same now on medicine. Like, what?
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yep. So Dr. Marty Makary, this is what I voted for. Let's do it.
Okay, so for me, I'm back to making fun of the United Kingdom.
Real quick, we should make note that we updated the link in the chat for our sponsor. Is that correct?
Yes, Home Title Lock link is updated for those curious. Okay, back to making fun of the UK. Keir Starmer, big victory lap win. He confirmed ninja swords will be banned by this summer.
What?
We will promise action. When we promise action, we will take it. This is addressing the epidemic levels of knife crime that is ruining lives across Britain, according to Keir Starmer. And for those curious about what this would actually are like the Japanese invading the UK, I don't know. The Home Office has announced that ninja swords will be banned from August, with anyone caught with one on private property facing up to 6 months in jail. I also saw that they arrested a guy for a Zelda replica sword. They're really cracking down on it. I could think of other ways to crack down on knife crime, but I feel like the UK is like 3-4 steps too far down the crazy road to actually address this properly. And I was looking up, like, how did this even come about? I guess there's this thing called Ronin's Law. There was a kid that got murdered by 2 other boys with a ninja sword. But that's like 1% of knife crime is this ninja sword. Obviously, terrible story. Really sad to hear this. But the problem with knife crime is that most of it is kitchen knives. So are we going to be taking kitchen knives from people in the UK? Like, this is like
they might. They're kind of nuts right now. They might do that, but no, probably not.
The UK just seems so
I'm trying
unserious.
to think of like who's going to be populating UK prisons. We're going to have Christians who pray for an end to abortion in their home privately next to samurai warriors. Like that's who's going to be in jail in the UK. In the Tower of London.
No, wait. They said ninja swords. They didn't say samurai swords were a problem.
Oh,
True.
okay. Well, no, you were right.
They actually, I did look into it, Josh. The stipulation is a blade a certain length.
Yeah, I know.
A certain whatever.
Ninja swords.
I wish this was like, it is funny because I saw this. I was like, are ninjas in the UK? It's not. People are getting stabbed. Like, I think they're saying like 100, 200 people a day are getting stabbed in the UK. Like, at what? Because they don't have guns. They don't have serious police at this point, and they just let anyone into their country, legal or illegal. Like, you can't see any way that this doesn't end well.
Yeah.
I mean,
suicidal.
This is just basic justice.
Yeah.
Like,
some civilizations are better than others, and if you import people from crazy countries, and I think the UK has an Islam problem, radical Islam problem. That's just the case.
Just a theory.
Yeah. The problem isn't the knives.
Serious. Yeah. No, actually it's the ninja swords, Josh. And guess what? They're acting on that. They're getting that one done, which is really
promises made, promises kept.
Meanwhile,
we got rid of an M13.
Yeah, seriously. Okay. Well, hey, I had this great interview with Will Chamberlain, Article 3 Project. Just really knowledgeable. Hopefully you can get a little insight on the lawfare going on. So I'm going to play that now. But before we get to that, if you want to help us out, subscribe here on YouTube. It's a place, it's the hub where everyone hangs out live, but we also got clips coming for you. You can join the Champions Club. CatholicVote.org/champions is the best way to help us. Thank you to all of our champions listening today. Pray for us. Pray for what's going on in Kansas. That's going on right about now. So say a prayer for us. St. Thomas More, St. Fidelis, Our Lady of Guadalupe. Pray for us and enjoy the interview. And we'll see you guys ready for a great show on Monday. All right. And today I'm joined by Will Chamberlain, Senior Counsel at Article 3 Project. Will, I'm not a lawyer. I don't claim to be a lawyer. But there's a lot of lawfare going on right now. So first off, March 18th, I got 4 things for you. Elon Musk has to reinstate USAID workers. Trump to disclose when and where flights left with terrorists. C, reinstate transgender service members to the military, and reinstatement of the Department of Education grants. Listen, from a non-legal perspective, it seems like people overreaching into what should be executive power. Is that an accurate read here, or is this a constitutional crisis?
I mean, it's a constitutional crisis, but not for the reason people are saying it is. The constitutional crisis is being created by the judiciary encroaching on the president's Article 2 prerogatives. So, I mean, the simplest one is obviously this Judge James Boasberg, who decided to order planes to turn around carrying illegal aliens who are members of a designated foreign terrorist organization. Sorry, that's not your right. That's not your authority. Not only is it within the president's foreign policy powers under Article 2, it's also the Alien Enemies Act, which doesn't provide any role for judicial review. So all this stuff is just really a sign of a judiciary run wild. And even the other things you mentioned, I think that they're just being wildly over aggressive, and it's about time that Chief Justice Roberts put a stop to it.
Yeah, and is this a loggerheads that Trump saw coming? Like this to me isn't a new issue in terms of judge shopping or whatever. People claim it happened under the last administration as well. Was his intention, do you think, to actually have a long-term solution to district court judges putting temporary injunctions on presidential action?
I mean, this is something that I think the administration and people in the administration have been thinking about. I think they anticipated a decent number of injunctions, maybe not this many and maybe not as aggressively. Like, I'm sure they didn't really think that the, flying out illegal aliens was going to trigger injunctions against them and orders for the planes to turn around. But I would suspect that on some of this stuff, they're actually trying to get judicial review. So, for example, just recently, Trump announced that he was going to fire 2 people on, I believe, the Federal Trade Commission, fired 2 of the Democrat nominees to that. Well, historically, that's been as a multi-member commission that's, created by Congress and has this quasi-judicial function. There's been like a for-cause removal requirement. And the president is actively saying, no, I'm just firing you at will. I don't care. I don't think this for-cause removal provision is constitutional. I think we're going to challenge it. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to reverse this case called Humphrey's Executor, which has been around since the 30s, which insulated these people from at-will removal. And so that's where you expect there to be pushback. That's where you're expecting litigation and trying to, bring it about. But on some of this stuff, I'm sure they're just completely surprised and taken aback by what these judges are doing.
Yeah, I was looking into this a little bit deeper, and there's a Harvard Law Review article. 67% of all injunctions this century came against President Trump in his first term. 92% were imposed by Democrat-appointed judges. Is this a coincidence, or has this been a long-running tradition with left-wing leaning judges?
There's always been some of this. I was reading about Bill Barr, who was Attorney General, obviously under Trump, but he was also Attorney General under the first George Bush's administration, all the way back in the 90s. And he talked about in his book, actually, where they had a whole bunch of Cuban illegal immigrants who were violent, the Mariel boat lift, and they did a prison rebellion actually down in Florida. And the first Bush administration put it down. They arrested all the ringleaders. And what Barr said is that he immediately had people saying, you need to get these people back to Cuba as soon as possible before the lawyers understand what's even happened. So before they had even allowed there to be reporting, or before they even publicized that they had put down this prison rebellion, all of the illegal aliens involved were back in Cuba so that there were no injunctions. So I think that there was, certainly Barr has anticipated this, and all these left-wing civil liberties groups are used to being active on this front. It's really interesting, though, how none of them seem to find any reason to object to any of the aggressive prosecutorial tactics used against the J6ers. I guess it's only, violent, criminal, illegal aliens that really the DC bar is even slightly interested in helping, not just American citizens.
Why do you think there wasn't resistance from the other side on, say, the January 6th prosecutors? Were they too scared to bring up these kind of injunctions in front of judges, or they just didn't think the judges would offer injunctions?
I mean, this is a serious critique of the conservative legal movement, TM, Federal Society, all of them. And I mean, we can be serious about it. The left-leaning lawyers, even if they work at big law firms, take on these cases pro bono, but you couldn't find, I mean, even, big sort of right-leaning law firms historically, places like Jones Day, that have a lot of lawyers that ended up staffing the administration, they weren't there to defend the January 6ers. They weren't using their pro bono hours to help them out. And it was left to people. I mean, there were a few people who did really, really good work pro bono or low bono. Bill Shipley is a good example of that. Marina Medvin, there's a few others. But for the most part, these guys were just, they were either getting public defenders who hated them and thought they deserved to go to jail, or they were getting very, very bad lawyers. And in some cases, it actually opened up kind of grifts where you had some very, very bad lawyers with almost no criminal experience doing really poor jobs for their clients and getting them much worse settlements, much worse plea bargains than they would have gotten had they been represented by competent counsel.
It's interesting. So we're mentioning kind of injunctions, judge shopping. All this keeps happening more and more. And I saw that Justice Roberts said, for more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. So question for you, is impeachment actually a way to push back against, say, unconstitutional overreach, or is there some other solution that we might not be hearing about?
I mean, there is such a thing as a judicial decision that is so bad that it justifies impeachment, right? And I'm not saying every wrong judicial decision does that, and I would say most wrong judicial decisions don't. The problem with what Judge Boasberg did was it was such a dramatic encroachment on the president's Article 2 authority, and not only did he encroach upon it, he imposed immediate short-term deadlines demanding immediate compliance for things that were completely lawless in the first instance. I can only think of one other ruling like this that probably would have justified impeachment on its own. That was when William Douglas, who was a Supreme Court justice at the time back in the 70s, tried to tell the Nixon administration to stop bombing Cambodia. Sorry, not your job, foreign policy, right? Like whatever the merits of bombing or not bombing Cambodia, that's clearly not the judicial role. There's no judicial role in telling the commander and the chief of the military how to use his forces. So I think that's the problem here. I mean, this is just so egregious that it cried out for an immediate impeachment resolution. So I think that's what you got here.
So do you think there is a long-term solution outside of just fighting these things out in the court, long drawn out? There's just going to be injunctions left and right?
You're going to see, first off, you're obviously going to see this impeachment hearing go forward. Now, I mean, to be clear, we don't have 67 votes in the Senate, so we're not going to kick Boasberg out of his seat. The medium term, though, I think that the Republicans are going to take seriously the idea of jurisdiction stripping legislation. So, I mean, to explain to your audience, the Supreme Court's jurisdiction is laid out for the most part in the Constitution, and its role is laid out in the Constitution. But the inferior courts are created by Congress, and the Constitution says that these are created by Congress, and they can be restructured. They can have their authority taken from them. Certain categories of cases can be stripped from them entirely, or new courts can be created to handle those category of cases. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that as a potential reform option. Another potential reform option would be to, put new, more stringent requirements on these nationwide injunctions, like, basically saying that if you're going to hear a nationwide injunction, you need to have a 3-judge panel. You need to have immediate appeal. There's no such thing as like unappealable TRO on a nationwide injunction. Like if you do a nationwide TRO, it's immediately appealable, which would be an exception to temporary restraining orders, which are normally not appealable because they're supposed to expire fairly quickly. So there are a lot of like little tweaks that can do that are actually like productive solutions. Impeachment is kind of more the process is the punishment. We want to deter this sort of behavior from judges going forward. So, and they certainly didn't hesitate to impeach Donald Trump. So we're going to inflict it upon them when they do something totally lawless. So that's kind of how I would think about it, basic structure.
With the specific Bosenberg case, where's the resolution on this? The Supreme Court, and how specifically is that resolved?
I think actually I doubt this even gets to the Supreme Court before it gets reversed by the Court of Appeals. I think the Court of Appeals is, it got in the way of what Judge Ali was trying to do not Judge Ali, but it got in the way of the special counsel case where the special counsel was trying to say he can't be fired. The district court agreed, the DC Circuit didn't. I think that's what's about to happen here. The moment you have a DC Circuit actually review this Boasberg case, they're going to say, no, you don't have the authority to do any of this. That's my guess.
Which of the most prominent cases brought against Trump in actions right now do you think could actually not go his way, for example?
I mean, there's some risk. I know he's trying to abolish the Department of Education. I think that that's going to be tricky because he's not doing it with Congress. That's a big congressionally authorized funding. I think there's a good chance he could lose that, and he could lose on some of these grants if they're not, if they aren't vested, if discretion to give those grants wasn't vested to the agency. And I think also there's some risk that he loses on this Humphreys executor argument, right? I don't know that he'll be able to get these FTC people to be fired at will. Because I mean, under current law, like Humphreys executor is still good law, and Humphreys executor clearly covers basically the FTC and the FCC, the Federal Trade Commission, Federal Communications Commission, from this sort of at will removal. So I wouldn't be surprised if he loses there. I think the administration knows it is trying to change current law. They have a good argument, good reason to think that they'll win, but you never can bet on the court to decide to reverse 90-year-old precedent.
So back to the point you had before, you're saying like, okay, the public's attention is on a lot of these legal fights right now. That's the fight of the Trump administration. Personally, I don't remember this happening as much attention, say during the Biden administration or even Trump 1.0. So do you think that's a smart play from the Trump administration? This is the real battle that needs to be had for progress to be made?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be aggressive now. And they should be. They should be trying to push the limits. I mean, one of the things about Obama, especially Obama, the Obama administration was unbelievably aggressive. And they weren't the victim of a bunch of injunctions, but they kept losing on unanimous decisions to the Supreme Court. I don't know if you remember that, but that was very common, that they were doing stuff that was so lawless, it was constantly getting reversed to the Supreme Court. Here, it's the inverse. The Supreme Court is conservative, so the issue is not getting the Supreme Court to agree with Trump necessarily, but you have all these liberal district judges who are being shopped for and issuing these wild injunctions. So it's a different angle that has to be addressed differently. We ultimately need the Supreme Court to come down and, come out the right way on these temporary restraining orders and put a stop to them. But until then, yeah, this was the fight that Trump should have picked.
Yeah, you might remember this specific case, but I think the Supreme Court was 5-4 on the USAID funding. Like the money had to go out the door. They decided at the end of the day. Was that surprising to you, that ruling? Because I remember, was it Justice Alito really had a scorched earth opinion on this about the judge shopping? What do you think about that whole situation?
I think it was definitely a weird opinion. I think it's ultimately going to come out the right way. I think the weirdness is an artifact of the procedural posture, which is that this is coming up as a temporary restraining order, which is normally not appealable. But I still think that what happened was Justice Roberts and Justice Barrett got way too cute, because here's what happened, right? The district judge issues his order, disperse $2 billion in 36 hours. Justice Roberts stays that order, says, whoa, hold on. And then a few days later agrees with 4 other justices to lift the stay, and then says, but, as some advice, you should name who exactly you expect the government to give money to, not just generally give all the money out, but like say who needs to receive it. And also account for the logistics of getting that money out the door, like don't set any immediate deadlines. So that was what Justice Roberts and Barrett probably thought they were doing some sort of compromise. The thing why they were getting too cute is that if they're doing that, they are reversing the underlying order. The underlying order said disperse $2 billion in 36 hours. If there was a stay and then that stay is vacated, well, that underlying order goes back into effect, and everything you're saying is just advisory. Like Judge Ali could theoretically just ignore it. You just be like, whatever. I mean, they said some stuff about logistics. I don't care. What they did was they lifted the stay on my order, so my order goes into effect. Pay out the money or you're in contempt. Which is why Roberts and Barrett were getting too cute. They should have made clear that given what they thought, which is this needed to be way more specific and they needed to account for the logistics, then you needed to throw out the order in the first instance and tell the district judge to try again. But this is sort of an artifact of it. Roberts historically has always tried to get cute with this stuff to maintain the balance and appear nonpartisan. But in reality, he's undermining the legitimacy of the whole judiciary by not bringing his judges to heel.
Mm-hmm. And final question for you. I heard the word ignore come up here, and a lot of people are accusing President Trump of ignoring or telling him to ignore, say, Supreme Court decisions or other stays or things like that, especially with the Bosenberg case. They're like, oh, just ignore it. I actually don't think that's what the Trump administration is arguing. They're saying that it just wasn't good to begin with. So would you say, has there been an instance of him ignoring? Would you advise going that route of just ignoring some of these things? or is it we got to communicate better to the public that we're not actually ignoring? Just could you clear some of that
Yeah,
up
they're
for us?
bending over backwards to like comply with the letter of these unlawful rulings to try and keep the good relations between the court and the executive branch. They don't want to breach it. I know that's what they're trying to do. Like if you read the transcripts, they're trying to say, look, we complied with your written minute order. I know you wanted us to turn planes around midair. Your written minute order didn't say that. We're not going to obey an oral injunction because that's not a thing. So they're trying to comply, but one of the things they're doing is they really are screaming in legal prose at the court to get it together. So in the latest filing in the Boasberg case, in this Trenda Aragua case, it was signed by Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, Emil Bove, and that's the entire top level of the Department of Justice. When those three people all sign a brief, that's the government saying, you need to listen. We're serious, right? Like, we are not happy with your ruling. And we think you are wildly overboard. This isn't just a normal appeal. This is the entire Department of Justice top leadership saying, you're screwing up, court. You need to stop. So eventually, the attempts of the administration to bend and comply with lawless orders that infringe on Article 2 prerogatives, I mean, they'll only work for so long. Eventually, if the courts keep doing this, they're going to order the president to do something that he just will not do. And that's a real risk because what happens when he just says, I can't do that. Sorry. Moving on. Like, I can't obey the terms of your order. You need to stay it. And I mean, we saw a little bit of give from Judge Boasberg. He imposed this rush deadline, and then the court gave him this filing and said, please stay your ruling or else. And he stayed it because he's like, okay, you guys do need, if you aren't able to appeal it, then you are going to ignore it.
Okay, so what's the implication? We reached that final destination where the goodwill runs
close,
out,
and the courts need to come back from the brink. That's the final implication. Like we're close to ignoring it. I hope we don't get there. I don't hope we don't have to, but I think if we have to ignore them, we should ignore.
Wow. Okay. Close.
So,
well, thank you for the expertise today. If people want to follow you, check out what you got going on. Where should they go?
At Will Chamberlain on Twitter, and also a3paction.org has a lot of ways you can take action. Makes it very easy within like 30 seconds, a couple clicks. You can reach out, email your senator. And, we have a lot of people on our team that have worked in Senate offices before. They know that what senators pay attention to is not what the general hubbub is necessarily on Twitter, but it's what their constituents say.
Great. Thanks, Will. Appreciate the time.